Right, okay, so now what I'm looking at today is we're going to do one that is one of these ones that is really deceptively simple, but you can do loads of exciting things with it. So what I suggest is you watch this first one and then we'll sort of build it up together. So for this one, you need to have an outline. Now you can be very, very geometric and get your rulers out and kind of draw, but I'm just going to freehand draw a little square like that. And what I like about this one is it kind of does quite a sort of magical thing. What we're going to try and imagine is we're going to repeat the shape of the frame, but we're going to slightly move it out of alignment each time. So I've got a square here, and I'm going to put my pen just slightly in from that edge there. I'm going to bring my pen down and touch just below, and then so I'm kind of doing the same shape, but it's slightly out of alignment. So I'm getting a bit like a sort of twist happening. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the next layer. And I'm going to go round. I'm trying to keep a square shape. It doesn't really matter if it kind of goes off a little bit, you know, because we're doing something quite organic. We're not trying to be super precise. If you are a super precise person, you are welcome to have a go at this with a ruler later. But as you can see, as you start drawing this, and each time you slightly displace your line as you go in and you go smaller, you start to get this sort of, oh, I've changed direction, look, that's quite funny, that works quite nice actually, look, I've gone all the way that, and then I've dropped down that way, so I'm going to carry on that way. But you get like this sort of spiraling kind of feeling happening, and it creates this sort of movement as it comes up towards you, as if something is sort of reaching up from below. And I can just fit the last two little ones in like that, and it gives this kind of spiral kind of effect, which I've slightly messed up by changing direction, but actually I don't mind, I don't like it. I quite like it. So what's nice about this is then you can just give yourself quite simple cells next to each other with different and you can do the same thing in each one, and it starts to create a kind of pattern across the edges as well. Because if I then do the next one, I'm going to try and do what I did last time, which is going to be quite awkward now, because you know, if you do a mistake that works, you then have to do it again because it works, and then you think, oh no, what did I do? I can't remember, it was a mistake. So I'm going to try. So I'm going to do one next to it, and just build it up in the same way. You might find it easy to do it as a complete square, sort of going around in order. I don't, for some reason, find that so easy. I like to sort of move my pen, as you can see, and sort of do starts and finishes. And now I've got to change direction, but maybe I'll just try and do this one how it's supposed to be, and you can see a bit more what I was trying to get. So I'm going to try and keep the spiral going in the same way. And I don't mind it when it sort of changes and the sort of shape distorts a bit. I think it looks quite cool when these things sort of happen. But I'm just going to keep on each time slightly disrupting my square. So each time the square happens, it's changing, and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller into the middle. And that kind of gives you this kind of weird like spiral, as if you're looking down on top of a kind of spiral or a pyramid or something with those sort of square edges. And I quite like these. You can build up whole kind of pages of these sort of shapes. But I thought I'd try it in some different shapes, different sort of outlines, and we'll sort of fit them together and see what kind of goes. So I was thinking, if I then put like, now you can't have a complete circle for obvious reasons because it doesn't really work because the circle is completely even. But if you try and do, I thought, let's see what happens if we do an oval. And each time as we go round, we get the 2 points of the oval to touch at a slightly different point to the one below. So this may feel a bit harder to draw, but we can keep sort of going round and around. And then every time you do another oval, it's going to touch the one below at a slightly different point as a sort of spiral. And again, it's going to come right into the middle. So that's quite an interesting feel. That's quite a different one. So that's kind of an ovally kind of shape. So I'm going to try a triangular one, kind of put that in, but I'm going to make sure there's a triangle, and it sort of overlaps the one beneath. But there's my sort of triangle base. So again, let's try sort of bouncing that triangle round on itself, and I've got some overlap happening as well where they come round, and that one's, again, just each time just make the points of the triangle touch the one below at a slightly different point. Yeah, and that's sort of, again, that's got something sort of different about it, and I can always sort of like expand some lines kind of coming around it. So I'm starting to get just sort of, it's almost start to look a little bit like rosebuds, or sort of like things sort of folding round on each other, which is quite nice. So let's put I'm going to put, can we try a different shape? Let's try a more irregular shape and see what that looks like. This is going to be quite interesting. I don't really know how it's going to turn out, but we'll give it a go. So I'm just going to try and see each time, just think about that point there, and then I've got to move it to a slightly different location. So that point there, I need to move it across a bit, and then I'm going to join up with that one there. And then each time, so I'm going to start here, I'm going to come up to there, and you feel like you're going to get quite confused, but just keep looking at the corner of the one below, and then just thinking, well, I've got to finish slightly ahead of where that one was. So I'm going to come round, and so I've got to start slightly after that one and come in slightly after, and start from that same point and bring that round. Here we go, and I'm getting that kind of spiral is happening, and it's giving me lots of nice edges that we can come back and think about. But just, it's actually, again, very simple. It's just where we're placing the line. So the actual act of what we're drawing is not complex, but as we keep building up this shape, the overall effect becomes more and more complicated looking. And people sort of say, oh, how have you done that? That's really interesting. Just come right into the sort of small as we can in the middle, and there we go. And so that's like a sort of five-sided shape, kind of spiraling off into sort of nothingness. So I'm going to put, I quite like these sort of ones that are sort of building up here. So let's put something. Can I think of another strange shape we could put in here? We could do just like a really weird oval with a point. Now let's see if I can get that to do something. Okay, so I've got a straight edge here. That's going to come down to there. And then I've got, this is kind of a line going all the way around, but I'm going to touch the oval at one point and then sort of bring it round again. So then I'm going to do another straight, just moving round, and then I've got my oval touch point there, so I want to just push that slightly round a bit further. Now you see it is working. However weird the shape we give ourselves, we can get it to do this kind of infinite spiral kind of effect. And bring that round to there, and then take that round, touch the oval slightly different, bring it round, and I'm just getting, that's creating a really interesting spiral. That's sort of, I really like that one. That looks like sort of staircases folding in on each other. I think that's really quite unusual. So take that one there and bring that oval round, and one more line disappearing off inside itself. So this I really like. This has got really nice kind of like staircase kind of feel. This is all starting to feel quite sort of MC Escher, isn't it? That sort of, I don't know if you know the artist, but he's that, you probably come across his work without knowing who he is. He's the guy that does all those impossible drawings and sort of like infinite patterns that match up, and you can't imagine how he did it. And all those sort of staircases that defy the laws of perspective. Right, so that's quite a nice one. So I did like that one. I like the way that was moving round. So let me try, I'm going to try a long, thin, rectangular shape that's going to be underneath the others. So there's my kind of long rectangle, and so I want to send that spiraling away. So again, just each corner, just think about moving it further down than it was before. And I can't see that line there, but I'm going to kind of take it underneath the ones above, so it's slightly as if they're overlapping each other. And I can just bring that, I'm going to have to do quite a big one there to make that match up, but that doesn't really matter. We'll just see how it goes, and we'll just move each time to bring, sort of change that position of where the corner comes. And that one's really getting quite distorted very quickly. And that's probably kind of like all I'm going to, but again, I'm still liking these nice sort of spirally edges. And what I like about this, why it's so much fun, this one, is that we can really bring some shading into this to give it a real sort of sense of depth. So I'm going to swap to one of my thin pens. That one I'm using, by the way, with a 0.4, just for information's sake. And I'm hoping that I've got a nice thin 0.5 here, so I'm going to zoom in to the center of some of these spirals that I've got going on here. And I'm going to use some shading. Now, if I use shading on the smaller sections, that's going to enhance that effect of it disappearing downwards. So if I go in, I can just use some, is that pen working? Yes, it is. I can just use some lines just to sort of like shade into the lower down spiral sections and make them quite sort of dark looking. And with the lines, I'm going to try and sort of, this pen's a little bit dry, they don't last so long, the very fine ones. I might have to swap over for another one, but I'm just sort of bringing the lines up like little rays, kind of shading out into the shapes like that. This one's a bit, I might have to swap it over in a second, but if I just bring the rays so they're coming kind of up and they're sort of fanning out, so they're closer together at the edge of the bottom edge of the shape, and then they kind of open out, that starts to make it look a bit like it's tipping down. And as I come up into the biggest shapes, I'm going to do less lines, so they're further apart, and that sort of starts to give it that kind of spirally staircase. It's quite sort of like vertigo. I have to change pen. I think this one is on its way out, bless it. A short life, but a happy one, if you're a pen anyway. What have I got there? What is that I'm just picking up? That's a bit chunky, so there's a 0.2 of a millimetre. Gosh, yes, that's so chunky. But so as I come up, I'm just going to just put a few lines in so that they are less shady, and that hopefully enhances that feeling of them disappearing down into the center. And I can go back in and do that center just a lot darker. So when I've got one like this one up here, because it's already got this feeling of this sort of spiraling down underneath this section here, again, these ones where it's going down, I'm just going to put some little shading lines kind of in. And if I go closer together, where I've got this edge has developed here, I keep them spread open here, and then as I get close to the edge, I get them closer together. That starts to really look like a little bit of shadow, like this really is sort of tucking over the top of something below. So on this edge, I've got them wider apart, and then as I get towards the overhang, I'm going to draw them closer together, and that starts to sort of really make that look like a staircase that somehow appeared and folding down. So again, here, just put a few little lines and then draw them in closer together like that. And then down here where I've got the very little bottom, that can sort of get quite dark. And then where I've got these sort of lines up here, if I want to make them look quite sort of interesting, I can do like a half shadow. So just by doing some lines underneath, sort of into that edge there, it sort of makes them look like they are overlapping each other, as if the one above is casting a shadow on the one below, and it starts to make give these doodles a really kind of 3D quality. and it's just tight, close together, little tiny lines, just indicates that there's shading going round. And I can just put a few more there. It's got this nice sort of shaded kind of spiral effect. It's sort of going in around from there. And this little edge here, now that I'm looking at it, I could just put a bit of shading in here as well, and it will sort of look like more of the kind of tunnel effect that I'm getting. Just make that a little bit darker as it kind of goes around. Definitely a mysterious stairwell. I really like that one. I didn't know that one was going to work, but that was doing a flat line with a kind of like a D shape, I suppose, really. I'm going to try that again. That worked really nicely. And then I've got this one down here, which almost looks like a very tightly packed rosebud, doesn't it? It's got that kind of, I mean, you could see that being like a sort of abstract, you know, if I then put a leaf shape in it, sort of next to it, I could imagine that looking like a sort of rosebud flower. Anyway, so I think from here, I'm just going to think about where I've got these ones. Again, I'm going, like I did with this shading here, I'm just going to put some shading just under some of those sort of overlaps so that it enhances that 3D quality. So where I've got the overlap there, I can put a little bit more kind of shadow, and I can put some shadows in and just sort of bring those round. Just sort of so that it's got a bit more kind of depth in it. I don't know if you can see that because it's so sort of, it's quite delicate. Let's put some more light on it. And you could do a similar kind of effect if you wanted to move away from pen and use some colour pencil. We could do the same kind of thing to kind of just give that a bit of shadow. So I've got a blue pencil here that I've just grabbed off my workbench, so I can put just a little bit of colour shading along those sort of edges as if it's casting a shadow on the layer below. So I can just colour that sort of in, and it just gives it a softer kind of feel. And if I wanted to turn this into something that's more like flowers, you know, that colour and that softness would work quite well. And I just think about how the top edge of each of those sort of like almost like bandages is going to have, they're going to be light, so I leave that white, and then I can just bring a colour up to that. Sorry, that colouring is just making my camera shake a little bit. But there we go. So that's given me just a little bit of shading in there, and I could come in and work in between some of these shapes just to sort of darken them off. Like that. And one more thing I want to show you before we finish, if I can get this to work, of course, is a kind of, that's a brush pen, that's not going to work right, is what you can do with these as well is to kind of mirror them, and they work quite nicely like that. It's starting to look like a sort of piece of jewellery somehow, I don't know, sort of thing. So if I bring my camera over up here, if I do two, I'm going to turn this into two squares, so I'm drawing a rectangle. Just tilt it a bit, there we go. So I'm doing a rectangle, but I'm going to turn it into two squares by doing a line down the middle. And I'm going to do the same basic principle just by shifting that inner square round. Again, just each time I think of that corner, just moving, but I'm going to sort of spiral it this time, so I'm sort of spiraling that line that through this way and trying to keep my spiral moving in the same direction, just sort of disappearing off like that. And then with this one here, I'm going to try and do the mirror reverse of what I did there. So I'm going to bring it going up as much close to the other way as I can, and and then just work my way around again in a spiral. But by going the other way, it sort of creates two images that are kind of the mirror of each other. Oops, let's come off that line a bit there. And that sort of gives me a different kind of pattern that starts opening up in this sort of area. And then once I've got a spiral like this, I can go back in and I'm going to turn some of these triangle shapes into petal shapes. So I'm just going to soften the edge and the shape of them, and then just to make that a bit more obvious, I can go in and just colour around that to make that petal shape start appearing. And then I can see, right, okay, so I'm going to turn all of these long triangular slices into petals by sort of softening that edge each time round. I'm going to reverse it here and sort of soften and keep that sort of different look, and it starts to give it a different sort of feel, and it's just quite a fun way of playing with this pattern and seeing how it reflects and moves around, and just giving it that sort of, and there's something about that teardrop shape that always makes me think of sort of 1920s Art Deco. I don't know why, but it is quite a popular, I think it's because they always often use that sort of sunburst kind of sun ray effect, because there was a great movement and passion for sun bathing and sunlight and light being let in. I think because after the horrors of the First World War, where everything was so dark and gloomy and sort of, you know, I think they wanted to embrace this healthy outdoors kind of feel, and everything was about bringing shapes in that were sort of about sunshine and getting out into the countryside and away from the sort of industrial towns that have become very sort of dark and overcrowded. And so I think these sort of sun motifs are very popular then. But I think I'm really liking the way that's starting to look with those sort of petal shapes spiraling down in the same kind of way. And I'm starting to get a nice sort of spiral feel. And it'd be quite hard to work it out just drawing teardrop shapes on their own, because of trying to see how they fit together. But by giving yourself this sort of doodle structure first to work on, you can then go back in and edit those shapes and give them a sort of spiral style that might be quite, as I said, might be quite difficult to achieve if you didn't have that first to work with. And they start to look like, as say, sort of plant fronds or feathers or something interlocking like that. And again, it's always nice to work inside, when you're doing a small doodle piece, to work inside a little frame to give yourself a kind of border to work to. And then of course, once you've got the sort of teardrop shapes in, there's nothing to stop you coming in and adding some curls and things to that, because, you know, I'm going to swap to I've got a nice little fine green pen here, but you know, you could easily put some individual little sort of squirrely whirly patterns into those teardrop shapes. And again, now you've got a little frame to work with, the little frame with the teardrop shape. You can sort of place each one in and give it that little space just to turn each little petal of that into a sort of little individual painting. If I get up really close, maybe we can see that a bit better. I'm going to have to just move my paper down a bit. It might focus a bit better if I come straight onto it. I'm sorry if it's slightly fuzzy, but I will, of course, send you a scan of this. I don't think it's going to focus any tighter than that, unfortunately, because it's just too small for my camera. But if I do one in black, you might see it a bit better, because I suppose the green is quite faint. So if I just do a little, all I'm doing is a little spiral that comes around into that teardrop shape and then has a sort of wiggly tail that goes down into that area here. I hope that's not too, I think it's better if I just come back a little bit. You can see it a little bit better. And there we go. So these are the sort of trippy spirals, which when you see them all sort of finished and as they look really complicated, you think, gosh, how did you construct all of that? And actually, It's really quite simple, isn't it? It's quite good fun. So there we go. So I'm going to come back to my camera. Hang on, let me just click on some things, and you can let me